understand that, okay, we will be discussing about a couple of very important examples, and then how it is like this elasticity is related to the demand curve and the supply curve, and then what happens when there is elasticity with response to income and the cross price elasticity of demand as well. Okay. So we're going to like take a scenario, an example, which we'll be like running through almost the first half of this session. Okay, for discussing the demand elasticity, we'll be using the same example. So just like try to understand what is this about. So imagine you're going to design a website, as you're like running a website design firm, and you're designing for local businesses, okay, nearby. So you're kind of charging around $200 per website, okay. So and then like you are kind of doing 12 websites per month. Okay, so you later found out, okay, you have to like increase the price to $250 instead of $200, because you're investing a lot of time. So including your opportunity cost of the time, you're planning to increase a price of designing a website from $200 to $250. Okay, so let's see what happens to the supply and what happens to the demand curve when this happens. Okay. Okay, so what is elasticity? It's actually nothing but how one variable responds when there's a change in the other variable. We always have quantity and price here, right? So what happens when quantity changes for price? What happens if the price changes in quantity? Okay, so that is actually elasticity. Okay, so we have an example of website designing, right? So is it if we're going to increase the price, demand for the website is going to fall or not? Okay, so that's what we're going to discuss right now. So demand elasticity. Okay, so to define elasticity, it's nothing but a numerical measure of responsiveness of the quantity demanded to one of its determinants. Okay, so we're just going to discuss about demand elasticity. So we just like talk about the responsiveness of the quantity demanded. Okay, yes, this is what I was talking about. Price elasticity of demand measures how much quantity demanded responds to the change in the price. QD is nothing but the quantity demanded, and P is nothing but your price. We have been discussing all of this in a previous session on supply, demand, and equilibrium. Okay, so the formula for this price elasticity of demand is percentage change in the quantity demanded divided by percentage change in the price. Okay, so let's like try to like see how this formula has been computed and how are we going to compute this percentage change for the quantity as well as for the price. Okay. Okay, so this is how the example looks like. uh, Imagine we have a quantity demanded in our x-axis and price in the y-axis as always. So if the q1 point is here and q2 is here, so here the quantity is kind of falling by 15% and the price is increasing by 10%. So to calculate the price elasticity of demand, we have 15% divided by 10%, which is 1.5. Okay, we have it here. Okay, so since here the price is kind of decreasing, sorry, increasing, and the quantity is decreasing, right? So both are moving in the opposite direction, right? So it actually a negative elasticity of demand, but we will never include a negative sign in front of the elasticity. Okay, so even if it is if the numbers are moving in the opposite direction, we will always have the elasticity as a positive number. Okay. Okay, so along the demand curve we can see the P and Q are moving in the opposite direction. So that's what I was talking about. But which actually makes this elasticity negative, but we'll never use a negative sign. It's always a positive number. Okay, and the demand for website here, uh, how do we like calculate the percentage change to understand the demand for your websites? Okay, so percentage change in the earlier session, see here we just like had the numbers in the percentage change, right? Here we discussed it was 10% increase in price and 15% decrease in quantity. But if you have it as a normal points in your graph, how are we going to compute? Okay, let's see. It's actually based on a 10 grade math. Okay, so n value minus start value divided by the start value into 100. So here it is the here the price is actually at $200, and it is increasing to 250. So n value is 250, start value is 200. Okay, and then if you're going to calculate the demand, let's see what happens here. Okay, the percentage change, we are subtracting 200 from $250 and divided by 200. Okay, so which is 25%. Okay, so here the percentage change in the price is 25%. And for the demand, quantity demanded, let's see. Okay, okay, so before going to the quantity demanded, if we are just like trying to calculate the price percentage change from A to B to B to A. Imagine you are currently in the right in the position of A, and then you're planning to increase the price to B, which is $250. Here what happens? The price is kind of rising by 25%, which we just saw in the previous example, and the quantity kind of falls by 300 33%, sorry. Okay, the quantity kind of falls, actually it's decreasing by 33%. So 33 divided by 25% is equal to 1.33. But imagine you have a price already at $250 for designing one particular website, and you want to like decrease the price to $200. The elasticity is being computed at as 2.5, because you have 50% decrease, a percentage change decrease in the price, and 20% decrease in the increase in the quantity. So we are getting 2.5. Okay, so when you just like compute the demand for your websites with the same points from A to B, and from B to A, the elasticity is changing. Actually, this should not be the case. Okay, so this is the actual issue we have right now. So we can kind of solve this problem by using a midpoint method. Instead of like having a start value in the denominator, if you use a midpoint, you can have the same numbers in both the elasticities. From A to B or B to A, you will be having the same answer. Okay. See, here we are using the midpoint value as 225 for 200 and 250. So we just like get the price change as 22.2%. And for the quantity, it is for 8 and 12, the midpoint is 10, because it's the halfway between for both the points. So the percentage change in the quantity is 40%. So here the price elasticity of demand is 1.8. So if you compute it from A to B or B to A, we'll be having the same number. Okay. Okay. So let's see what actually helps us to determine this price elasticity. Okay. We'll be having two examples right now. Okay. First one is, if the price of the goods rise by 20%, the quantity falls the most. For example, you have both goods, which and for both of the goods, the price is kind of increasing by 20%. So if the quantity of the good which has the highest price elasticity will falls the most, and for the good which is not having the highest price elasticity, it will not fall. I mean, we can just compare the price change in the insulin and using a cruise ship, and just like going on a cruise. Okay, so when the price increase for insulin, do you think people will stop buying it? No, because it's actually basic commodity that everybody needs. But if the price increases for like going on a cruise, definitely the demand will definitely decrease, right? Because the elasticity is kind of higher for the luxury items and lower for the basic things. Okay, so we'll be like looking into these kind of things by comparing two goods right now. Okay, first example is Rice Krispies with sunscreen. Okay, so if both of the prices, both of these goods prices rise by 20%, which one will which product's quantity will drop? Because like when you say Rice Krispies, it has a lot of substitute, whereas like sunscreen, I mean, just imagine just I'm not talking about the different brands, but sunscreens of general. It's actually an essential commodity, right? Okay, so it doesn't have a close substitute. So the price for the sunscreen, even though if it is kind of increasing, people will never stop buying it. Okay, so the lesson here is the price elasticity is kind of higher when you have a close substitutes. Okay, the second one example is blue jeans versus clothing. So when both of the goods price increase by 20%, what happens? I mean, if the jeans price is increasing, maybe we can just like shift to a substitute items like khakis, shorts, or speedos. Whereas, but generic, as you just say, clothing, all the clothing items price increase by 20%, irrespective of whether it's a shorts or a blue jean or formal pants or frocks, whatever it is. We can stop buying it, right? Because we have to wear clothes. So the lesson here is price elasticity is higher for narrowly defined goods than the broadly defined one. It's about like how you define things. Blue jeans is part of clothing, right? Yes. Second one is insulin and cruises. That's what I've told already, right? So if the price of these goods kind of increase by 20%, what happens? People with diabetes definitely go for insulin, even though if it is high, unless you don't have enough money to even buy insulin. Yes, I'm just like not talking about the very few negligible cases. In general, the insulin price will never affect the demand, whereas the cruises, it will definitely affect. Okay, so here the lesson learned is price elasticity is higher for the luxuries than for the necessities. And both interesting example, actually this is an interesting example that you should listen to. Gasoline in the short run versus gasoline in the long run. Okay, so if the price of the gasoline increases over 20%, we're talking about the same gasoline price. We're just like kind of comparing what happens in the short run and in the long run. Okay, so imagine if there are like 1,000 people in Coimbatore using cars. Only just 1,000 people are using cars, and then the price increases, is definitely all these people most of the times they will just like use cars as always. But in the longer run, what happens? They might go for an alternative. They might try using cabs, or they might like try to buy a hybrid car when they're trying to replace. Right? It might happen. So in the longer run, people will actually like shift to the alternative, like buying a hybrid car or buying smaller cars. They try to live closer to where they work. Okay, here the lesson learned is price elasticity is higher in the longer run than the shorter run for few items. Okay, so gasoline is an example here. Okay, so we have been like discussing about what happens to the price elasticity. So to sum it up, the extent to which close substitutes are available, the price elasticity actually kind of uh, high. Okay, and if the price elasticity is based on whether or how it is classified, whether it's broadly classified or narrowly classified, and the time. Even for the same product, the elasticity is kind of higher in the longer run than the short run. Okay, so these kind of things happen. This four kind of things happen. So next is like the variety of demand curves. So the economists actually like kind of classifying these demand curves according to the nature of its elasticity. Okay, so this elasticity and slope are like kind of related to each other. So but the slope I mean a demand curve will might have different slopes at different point of time. Okay, so the flatter the curve, bigger the elasticity. And if the kind of curve is very steep, the elasticity will kind of uh, gets to zero. Okay, so I will see. We'll be like seeing about five different examples about how the shape of the curve affects the elasticity of the demand. Okay. Okay, so we already know that price elasticity of demand is percentage change in the quantity divided by percentage change in the price. Okay, so here we see the price is kind of dropping from P1 to P2 for by 10%. Okay, the price is kind of falling by 10%, and quantity is kind of changing by 0% because the it's a vertical line. The demand curve is a vertical line. Okay, the price is kind of increasing or decreasing, people are going to buy the same quantity. We can say insulin. Okay, so right now we can say it is an inelastic demand. Okay, it is a perfectly inelastic demand. Price change never affects the quantity, whether it's a decrease or increase. If the insulin price is decreasing, are people going to buy it more? No. The increase insulin price is increasing, are they going to buy it? No. Right. Next is the inelastic demand. Okay, so here you can see the curve is kind of relatively steep when compared to the previous one. Okay, so here the price is kind of dropping by 10%. The quantity is changing. Earlier, there was no change in the quantity. Q1 was equal to Q2, but here it's not the case. Let's see what happens to the price. Kind of increasing, but it is less than 10%. Why we have 10% is here it is falling by 10%, it is increasing by less than 10%, which means when you compute, the answer will be less than 1. If it is like 10, it will be 1. That is a different case. That's the next example that we have. Okay, if the price increase is by 10% and if the quantity increase or decrease by 10%, less than 10%, here the elasticity is less than 1. So when you have it is less than 1, we call it as an inelastic demand. Okay, that previous one was a perfect inelastic demand. Here it is just an inelastic demand. Okay, here the elasticity is less than 1. Next one is a unit elastic demand. So here the percentage change in the price would be equal to the percentage change in quantity. Okay, when the price drops by 10%, quantity increase by 10%. Okay, okay. So here the elasticity is equal to 1. That's why we call this as a unit elastic demand. Okay. Next one is the elastic demand. So here the percentage change in the quantity is actually greater than 10% when there is a 10% change in the price. So all these cases we have a 10% change in price, but earlier we had a quantity less than 10% equal to 10%, and here it is greater than 10%. So when the price decrease by just 10%, the quantity is kind of increasing higher. Okay, so here we call that as the elastic demand. So the elasticity is actually greater than 1. Okay, here you see the curve is kind of getting relatively fat. Okay, the inelastic demand, the curve is kind of steep, and the elasticity was less than 1. Here in the elastic demand, the elasticity is kind of greater than 1. Okay, because the curve is kind of steep. Hope you can understand this. Okay, next one is a perfect elastic demand. Okay, it's actually a complete extreme of the perfect inelastic demand. Okay, so whatever the quantity you are looking for, the price will remain the same in this scenario. So here the price will never change. Here P1 is equal to P2. Okay, so for any change in the quantity, price never change. So we will be having the demand curve as a horizontal line. Okay, the price sensitivity is kind of little extreme because the elasticity is infinity. Okay, so because you have 0 in the denominator. Okay, so we have been discussing about 5 types of demands. Okay, perfectly inelastic demand, unit elastic demand, elastic demand, and perfectly elastic demand. Okay, so let's look into the elasticity of a linear demand curve. Okay, we have been discussing this about this linear demand curve earlier. Okay, here this slope of the linear demand curve is kind of constant. In the previous curves, we see the elasticity might change, but okay, here the elasticity is also changing, like the previous examples, but the slope is constant. Okay, because when you see the price is kind of dropping from $30 to $20, and the quantity is kind of increasing from 0 to 20, the slope is 5. Sorry, the elasticity is 5. Here the elasticity is 1. Okay, and again for the third range, we see the elasticity is 0.2. Okay, let's see what happens to the revenue when there is a elasticity in the price. Okay, so we have been discussing with the same example. If the price is kind of increasing for designing a website from $200 to $250. Okay, so we are increasing the price, but I'm not sure whether it will affect the quantity. And what happens if it affects the quantity? Whether my revenue will increase or fall. Let's see that. We have been discussing about this. Someone asked a question in a previous session. Hope you will be able to understand this. Okay, let's check this out. We always know revenue is equal to price into quantity. Okay, so any increase in price will have two effects on revenue. Either it will increase the revenue or decrease the revenue. Okay, so higher price means actually we always think, okay, we're going to get more revenue, right? But what if we are not selling enough items? If the queue, I mean the quantity kind of is decreasing, we really don't know, right? It's actually based on the law of demand. So let's see what happens. Okay, so if the demand is elastic, okay, which is actually which is greater than 1, what happens? A percentage change in the price is actually less than the quantity, or percentage change in quantity is greater than percentage change in price. Okay, so we'll just see this in the example. Okay, I'll show you the example. Okay, here the elasticity demand is 1.8. Okay, so if the price is $200, quantity demanded is 12. So if I have my prices $200, 12 people are asking me to design a website. But if I'm increasing the price, only 8 people are kind of asking me to design the website. Okay, so here I'm getting a revenue of $2,000. But earlier my revenue was $2,400. Though I'm increasing my price, my revenue is kind of dropping because it is a elastic demand. The elasticity is kind of high. Okay, when you say elastic demand, when the price increases, quantity decreases, right? So that is an elastic demand. Okay, so we are kind of losing the revenue because of the lesser quantity. But here, if you are kind of, if it happens otherwise, we are increasing the revenue. Okay, when demand is elastic, the price increase can cause a revenue to fall. Okay, what happens if a demand is inelastic, which is less than 1? Okay, the percentage change in the quantity is always less than percentage change in the price, right? So let's see the example here. I was kind of able to design 12 websites at $200. But if I'm increasing the price to 50, people were able to 10 people were asking me to design a website. So I was getting a revenue of $2,500. Earlier it was only $2,400. Okay, so earlier the number was 8. Remember, if you see the previous example, the number was 8 because the elasticity is greater than 1. Here the elasticity is less than 1. So it becomes 0.82. So the number becomes 10. Okay, so because of this, my revenue is kind of increasing. Okay, we have lost revenue due to the lower queue, but we have increase the revenue due to a higher fee. The same scenario, but the number is kind of higher here. Okay, so if the demand is inelastic, the price increase can cause the increase to price. Okay, so far we have been discussing about what is demand elasticity and few examples of what happens there and different types of demand curves, right? So now we'll be like looking into the elasticity of supply. Okay, so for elasticity of supply, we will be like looking into a small example of drug addiction. Okay, how the drug addiction actually is related to the drug related crime. Okay, if people are trying to, if the government is trying to prohibit drugs, okay, uh, whether it will increase or decrease the drug related crime. Let's see this. What happens with in relation to the supply curve and supply elasticity here. Okay, so see, most of the times I think you all know about the scenario. Maybe I'll just sum it up. If people kind of consuming illegal drugs, actually they get to get this kind of illegal drugs through crime. Okay, and with the money, most of the time they'll be able to like finance their crime level habits through this wrong money, right? So obviously this drug usage will definitely leads to the increase in the drug related crime. What happens when drug prohibition? Okay, if the government is kind of banning drugs, people try to somehow get the drugs to use it, or they'll stop using it. Okay, let's see what happens. Okay, what these effects have. Okay, okay, so you'll be just thinking it is actually an elastic curve. Okay, so we have quantity of drugs in x-axis and price in the y-axis. So we have the demand and supply curve. It actually interacts at some point in the equilibrium point of P1 and Q1. Okay, so this is the initial value of drug crime, the price into quantity. So this is the initial level of the drug crime right now, and this prohibition actually reduces the supply of drugs, so which actually made the curve shift to the left. Okay, when the quantity decreases, it is kind of shifting to the left, so that we are able to create a new equilibrium. But here the price is increasing. See, here since the demand drug is inelastic, here the price is kind of increasing. That's why you're getting a P2 and Q2 in the new equilibrium point. So result here is any increase in the total spending on drugs and in drug related crime. So you're getting a new value here. So this is my new revenue. P2 into Q2. This revenue is my new revenue. So there is an increase in the total spending on drugs. Though the quantity is decreasing, the spending is increasing. Okay, next we have an example of education. So what happens if people are getting educated? What happens to the drug usage and drug related crime and money spent on drug? Okay, so education actually reduces the demand for drugs. Okay, so this demand curve is kind of getting shifted to the left. Okay, the price as well as the quantity is falling because people are not, there is no demand also, right? So here you see this is the new money spent on drugs. Okay, a decrease in the total spending on drugs as well as in the drug related crime. So what the government should do, if they want to decrease the money spent on drugs, if they want to decrease the crime, they should not be banning drugs. They should be like increases chance of education to the young children, adults, and adolescents. So I'm not saying like you should not be banning drugs. You should like keep it open. You should ban drugs as well as you should increase the chance of education to the people. Okay. So We'll be looking on this with the price elasticity of supply. Okay, so it actually measures how quantity of supply responds to the change in the price. So in the demand elasticity, we have been discussing about how the quantity of demanded responds to change in price. But here we'll be like discussing the same thing on the supply curve. Okay, so we know this formula here is percentage change in the quantity supplied divided by percentage change in the price. Okay. Here also we will be using the midpoint method. We will not be using the start point and the end point. Okay, we will be using the midpoint method. Okay, so let's directly get into the examples and computation. Okay, so if the price is kind of increasing by 8% and the quantity is kind of increasing by 16%, okay, here the price elasticity is 2% because it is 16% divided by 8%. It's very simple. Okay, the percentage change in the quantity supply divided by the percentage change in the price. Okay, here you see the curve is S. It's a supply curve, not a demand curve. Demand curve will always be like this, right? So let's see different types of supply curves. Okay, there are like 5 different types of supply curves. Okay, here the flatter the curve, bigger the elasticity, and steeper the curve, smaller the elasticity. Okay, so let's see perfectly inelastic curve. Okay, so we have P1 and Q1. In the prices increase by 10%, the quantity is not increasing or decreasing. Okay, Q1 remains a Q1. So Q1 is equal to Q2. Okay, so 0% by 10% is 0%. Zero. The price elasticity is zero. It is perfectly inelastic. Okay, next one is inelastic. Here you see the curve is kind of a little steeper. What happens here? The price increased by 10%, but the quantity is kind of increasing less than 10%. Okay, so here the demand becomes less than 1. Okay, so the elasticity is less than, sorry, the elasticity is become less than 1 because you have less than 10%, so it can be 8%. 8% by 10%, it should be always less than 10%. So it is an inelastic supply. Next one is a unit elastic, which means percentage of change of price is always equal to the percentage change of quantity. When prices increase by 10%, the quantity supplied is also increases by 10%. So it is 1. Okay. Next comes the elastic. Here, percentage change in quantity is always greater than the price. So if a percentage change in price is 10%, here it actually the quantity is rises by more than 10%. So obviously greater than 10% divided by 10% is greater than 1. Okay, so it is an elastic curve. Next comes the perfectly elastic, which means whatever the quantity is demanded, the price remains constant. Okay, so there is no change in P, 0%. Quantity demanded, or I mean, quantity supplied, it changes by any percent. So we get infinity because we have 0 under the denominator. So it is infinity. Okay, here the elasticity is infinity because it's a perfectly elastic. Okay, what are things that determines this supply elasticity? If there are like more sellers can change the quantity they produce, the greater the price elasticity of the supply. For example, if you have a property on the beach, what happens? Supply of beachfront property is harder to vary, but less than, which is less elastic than the supply of new cars. Okay, so how it varies, let's see. We have a supply curve. We have a point here. So quantity demanded is 100 when it is like priced at $3. For $4, it's 200. So the elasticity is less than 1. But at $12, quantity demanded is 500. At $15, it's 525. So the elasticity is, sorry, earlier it was less than 1 and here it is greater than. Sorry, earlier it was greater than 1, here it is less than 1. Because here it is increasing, when the price increasing, the quantity is kind of increasing, but at a very less extent when compared to the previous one. Here, for a small change, there's a big change in the quantity. But here, there's a big for $3 change in the price. The change here is just 25 numbers. Okay, so the elasticity is less than 1. Here, the elasticity is greater than 1. So the supply, it becomes less elastic when the quantity is kind of increasing. Okay, because it has a capacity. The factory will have a capacity limits. Okay, so we have other elasticities as well. Okay, mm, the income. What happens to the elasticity of demand in case of income? Okay, so we have been discussing about this. Okay, if everybody started to earn more, what happens? Even if it is a normal good, people will try to buy it more. So increase in income will actually cause increase in demand for normal good. But if it is an inferior good, if the product is not good with a lot of defects, people will never buy it even though they have more money, right? So increase in income can cause a decrease in demand for an inferior good. Okay, so for inferior goods, the income elasticity should be less than zero, but for normal goods, it is actually greater than zero. Okay, we have been discussing it about the wider view. What happens to the percentage change in the quantity? If there is a percentage change in income, we're not talking about the percentage change in price. Okay, so instead of price, if we have income here, you call that as the income elasticity of demand. If you have a price here, we call it the price elasticity of demand. Okay, the next one is a cross price elasticity of demand. Okay, so if you have two products which are related to each other, whether it is complementary or supplementary, okay, so when there is a price change in that product, okay, the quantity of the related products actually vary, right? We have discussed this, but what happens to the elasticities? Okay, for a cross price elasticity of demand, percentage change in the price of good two actually results in the percentage change in the quantity of the good one. For example, if the pizza price is kind of increasing, demand for the burgers will increase, right? Because pizza's price is increasing, so people may shift to a burger. Okay, so that is a substitute. For substitutes, the price cost price elasticity is always greater than zero. Okay, but for complementary products, it is less than zero. For example, if you have a price of a computer, actually leads to decrease in the software demand because they're related to each other. Because people, the price of computers increasing, the number of people buying computers will decrease. So people looking for a software installation or MS Office will obviously decrease if we are not going for pirated version. Okay, so we have discussed about demand. Income elasticity of demand and cross price elasticity of demand. Okay, so it's kind of a very elaborate session on elasticity and on what happens in the what happens to the demand curve, what happens to the supply curve, and then how it is being applied in different areas. Okay, on different areas. Okay, we have been discussing about some applications as well. Okay, what happens to the drug banning? Does this drug banning increase or decrease the drug-related crimes? And we've been discussing about a lot of other things as well. Hope we are able to understand all this. If you got any questions, you can ask me now.